Now I shall read to you one of the most famous pieces of writing in the English language and in all English history. This was written by people who understood biblical submission to authority and who cared about getting along with authority, who were well aware that if they resist King George III's authority, why shouldn't other people resist their authority? They decided to record for posterity, for us, their reasons why American colonists should no longer submit to the British king's authority. As you listen to their words, sense the struggle within them to resist authority. These were not just rebels. They needed to justify what they were about to do as Christians. Innocent disobedience is rare. This was an exception. Here we go. In Congress, that means together. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Remember, they were just a poor little colony. Nobody knew about them at that time. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Meaning they were about to disobey authority, and they said, it just seems right that if all the nations of the earth ask in the future, why did they do that? Obviously, everybody knows you should submit to authority. Why wouldn't you? They said, we'd just like to explain ourselves why we're doing it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. They're saying, we're not doing this flippantly. They understand that would be imprudent. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. They're saying it's rare. They're saying innocent disobedience is rare. We want to acknowledge that. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, which is the name for taxes, they're usurping property, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And they list 27 facts about King George III. Here we go. 1. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. 2. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. 3. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of the large districts of people unless these people would relinquish the rights of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. 4. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, and for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Meaning, when you call people to courts that are far away just to annoy you and just to tire you out, that's wrong. Number 5, he has dissolved the representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. 6, he has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. 7, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising conditions of the new appropriation of lands. This clause right here is what they're fighting about with the Mexican immigrants. They misinterpret this clause. It was misunderstood, okay? But I got to keep going. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers, meaning no courts. Nobody's deciding anything, just him. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. Not much has changed. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Politicians keep growing and growing. Governments keep growing and growing. And they're saying that was a grievance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Notice, they did not say he couldn't tax. They said this with an attitude of humility and submission. They said, you can tax us, but can you give us representation? Can we have a say about taxes? You can tax, but give us a say. Today, we are taxed at the highest level in Australia, 40% plus 10% GST. And nobody says anything. Back then, they fought over, I believe, the tax on tea when they had the Boston Tea Party, correct me, 1%? 1%. They killed people over that. Today, 50%, and we're la-di-da, let the government grow. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. Do you know that Australia has been deprived of trials by jury by international law? The case of Danny Nalia going before the magistrate court because he was accused of vilifying the Muslim hearers and he spoke the truth about Islam. He was denied trial by jury. If he had been heard by a jury of his peers, it would have been a fair trial. Instead, it was a monkey trial, done for political gain, for political purposes. And he spent over $200,000 to fight for his innocence. This is what can happen to you in Australia. Where is our right to trial by jury? That is in the English Charter of Rights. It's gone. Slowly, all these things are eroding away, and people are just going innocently as if nothing's going to happen. The day has already come when the government will oppose and persecute Christianity. It has already come. This very week, the first time in the history of the Western world, a Christian has been arrested for not issuing a marriage license to homosexuals. It's come, and it's about to get worse. And you're not here to pray? Do you know what time it is? It's time to pray. And it's time to stand up. When you're persecuted, what are you going to do? They said, we're going to start a new nation because you took away our right to a trial by jury. By the way, Aussies, when you and I get the call to duty, jury duty, I don't want to hear any Christian go, oh no, I hate jury duty. You should be thankful that it still exists. You know what juries are? Juries are above all government. You, the juror, have the power to say no. No matter what the government is, no matter who's on the bench, no matter what any law is passed, a juror has the right to superimpose their common sense over everything else the government does. That's a jury. And the founding fathers of America believed the only defense against tyranny was trial by jury. And some of the founding fathers escaped with their lives because they went before not a magistrate or a judge. They went before a trial. They went to a trial of their jurors, of a jury of their peers. That means people who know you, they've seen you, not a bunch of strangers, not some strange magistrate who doesn't know you from a bar of soap. Because they went before a jury of their peers, many of the founding fathers who were persecuted in the legal system were found innocent and didn't die. If it had been King George, many of them would have simply been just, thrown into some dungeon and never seen again. We wouldn't even have the founding fathers. Trial by jury is a defense against tyranny. It is a wonderful privilege for an Australian to serve as a juror. Please take it seriously. Okay? Somebody's life is at stake when you're called to that duty. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. That's our heritage. That's our British heritage, by the way. We're not that different from America. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein arbitrary government, enlarging its boundaries, so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring them invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high sea to bear arms against their country, to become executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. That means to commit suicide. Some of the American colonists were so despondent, they just committed suicide because government was so bad. That is exactly what's happening in Australia right now. 3 people a day take their own lives because of the injustice of the family court. 3 Australians a day will not be with us because of the evil system of the family court. It happens here all the time. You might not experience it, you might not know it. He has excited domestic insurrection amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Okay? So back then you might think that's racist, but the Indians would come and scalp little kids' heads off. That's a pretty cruel way to die. Women, children. So they were saying there's no rules with the Indians when they had war. Finally, they say, listen to the heart of submission. They were not trying to rebel. Listen, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. That means we're all from British blood. At least we're like the same people at the start, right? Have some mercy. We're from the same family, but they were deaf to those pleas. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are of the right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, our sacred honor. And 56 of them signed their own death sentences. And the first one was John Hancock. And he signed very big. That's why in America you say, give me your John Hancock, because he wrote the biggest signature. That meant you were the first to die when the war starts. Theoretically. Some of them died, most of them escaped. They publicly put their name. We resist, but we do it with a submissive attitude, and we know the consequences that are about to come. We're going to be fighting for our lives. And the greatest empire on the earth is going to descend on us and try to kill all of us. That was the beginning of the United States of America. So, some resistance, some separation is innocent and achieve the greatest good. Israel separated from Egypt, America separated from England, Singapore separated from Malaysia, and none of them would be great countries today had they stayed joined to evil. Joined to evil. What does this mean for you and me? Right now, there's two cases I want you to think about. Number one, it's happening in America. A lady named Kim Davis, a county clerk in Kentucky, has refused to issue a marriage license to a homosexual couple because it goes against her conscience and her Christian belief. She has been arrested this week because she is resisting authority innocently. And the time has come when holding Christian beliefs will be tested and will be persecuted by evil ruling government. And you have to understand where are the limits of authority. Another Christian couple who owned a bakery in Oregon called Sweet Cakes by Melissa refused to bake a wedding cake for a lesbian couple. they were taken to court, and the court, the evil court with no jury, this is the problem because they don't have a jury, some evil judge found them guilty of not baking a cake and fined them. Do you know how much? $135,000 for not baking a cake for lesbians. US dollars. Do you know that rapists get a more lenient sentence than that? But to be a Christian in this day and age is going to cost. If you believe the end times, you and I need to be praying for our government.